At my grandson's university graduation, I stood beaming, ready for a photo. Then I heard him whisper to the photographer, "Crop the old lady out. She's going to ruin my Facebook." My heart shattered, yet I just smiled. Little did he know, some old ladies have more than just memories. My story begins now. Like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. The midday sun beat down on the sprawling university campus, reflecting off the sea of blue graduation gowns. Eleanor Vance, her best floral dress pressed perfectly despite the long bus journey, felt a surge of triumphant joy bubble in her chest. Liam, her grandson, her entire world, was graduating. She had arrived early, navigating the bustling crowds with a quiet determination, her heart swelling with an almost unbearable pride. The air buzzed with excitement, proud parents clutching bouquets, beaming siblings snapping photos, and the graduates themselves, a sea of youthful exuberance, ready to conquer the world. This was his day, the culmination of years of hard work, and more than that, the culmination of her life's singular focus. She spotted Liam near the main archway, his tall frame unmistakable, even in the uniform cap and gown. He was laughing with a group of friends, his smile bright and carefree. Eleanor's own smile widened, a crinkle forming at the corners of her eyes. When he finally looked her way, she waved, a small, tentative gesture. Liam offered a brief nod before turning back to his friends. A photographer, a young man with a friendly demeanor, beckoned them closer for individual portraits. Eleanor made her way over, her steps a little slower than they once were, but her spirit buoyant. "All right, Emma, let's get this over with," Liam said, his tone brisk as he pulled her slightly to his side. It wasn't unkind, not exactly, but it lacked the warmth she longed for. Still, she beamed up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. This was her boy, Michael's boy, standing tall and accomplished. She adjusted the lapel of his gown, a motherly instinct she couldn't suppress, even now. The photographer raised his camera, ready to capture the moment. Eleanor leaned in slightly, a soft maternal smile gracing her lips, prepared to be part of this cherished memory. Then a whisper, sharp and clear, cut through the joyous din and pierced Eleanor's heart like an icy splinter. "Just crop the old lady out, all right? She's going to ruin my Facebook." The words were barely audible, spoken directly to the photographer, but to Eleanor they echoed like a thunderclap in a silent room. Her smile faltered, her breath caught in her throat. The world, which moments before had been vibrant with celebration, seemed to dim, the sounds of laughter and chatter fading into a dull roar. A searing pain, sharp and visceral, twisted in her chest, making it difficult to draw air. She felt herself swaying, her knees threatening to buckle beneath her. Had she truly heard that? Her own grandson, dismissing her, reducing her to an unsightly flaw in his perfect picture? The young photographer, his face momentarily unsure, lowered his camera slightly. "Ma'am, would you prefer to step out of the frame?" he asked, his voice gentle, perhaps sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere. Before Eleanor could even form a response, Liam stepped in, his voice taking on a different timbre, a performative politeness. No, it's fine. She's my grandmother," he said, the words "my grandmother" sounding formal, almost clinical, as if he were explaining a distant relation to a stranger. He offered a quick, forced smile to the photographer, then subtly, almost imperceptibly, eased Eleanor a half step away from him, creating a fraction more distance between them. Eleanor swallowed, the dryness in her mouth making it difficult. She forced her lips into a semblance of a smile, a brittle, fragile thing that felt alien on her face. "It's Liam's big day," she managed to croak, the words barely a whisper. "Whatever he wants." Even now, after all these years, it was always about what Liam wanted, what Liam needed. Her desires, her feelings had long been relegated to an unspoken secondary status, if they were considered at all. As Liam resumed his confident posing, now with just his equally youthful and photogenic friends, Eleanor retreated slightly, watching from the periphery. The ache in her chest intensified, a dull, throbbing pain that spread through her veins. She thought of the sacrifices, the endless string of them that had paved Liam's path to this very moment. Expensive private schools, carefully chosen for their rigor, and networking opportunities. Summer programs abroad, essential for broadening his horizons. A sleek new car for his 18th birthday, so he doesn't have to rely on public transport like a commoner. And finally, the monumental university tuition. Each semester, a relentless drain on her meticulously saved retirement funds she had imagined stretching out comfortably through her golden years. She watched him now, a handsome, self-assured young man, his head thrown back in laughter as he joked with his peers. Her heart, already fractured by his callous words, felt utterly broken. He looked so happy, so vibrant, so utterly oblivious to the quiet woman standing just beyond the frame, the woman who had traded every comfort, every security for his future. A wave of memories, both comforting and heartbreaking, washed over her. Michael and Sarah, her son and daughter-in-law, gone too soon, leaving a gaping void in her life, and a terrified 12-year-old Liam clutching her hand, his small face streaked with tears. "Grandma, don't leave me," he had sobbed, burying his face in her skirt. And she hadn't. She had vowed then and there that she would be his rock, his foundation, his everything. And she had been. That vow had led to her selling her beloved home, the place she and Michael's father had built their life together, a home filled with 40 years of cherished memories. The decision had been agonizing, tearing at her soul, but Liam's university tuition had been non-negotiable, a necessity in her eyes. She moved into a small, impersonal apartment, a single bedroom with thin walls, a stark contrast to the sprawling garden and sun-drenched rooms of her old house. To make ends meet, she took a second job, part-time at a local grocery store, despite the throbbing pain in her arthritic knees and hands. Every shift was a physical battle, her body protesting with every heavy box lifted, every aisle walked. Health insurance, a luxury she could no longer afford, had been canceled. Her own well-being had become secondary, a distant concern overshadowed by Liam's needs, his future, his education. Now, as she watched him from her self-imposed distance, surrounded by his smart, fashionable friends, she felt a profound sense of alienation. She saw the expensive watches, the designer bags, the effortless confidence of privilege. She was a ghost in his world, an outdated relic, an embarrassment, a stranger. Later that evening, back in Liam's immaculately clean, modern apartment, Eleanor stood before the bathroom mirror, her gaze fixed on her reflection. Who was this woman? Her hair, once a vibrant silver, was now thin and dull. Deep lines etched around her eyes and mouth told a story of countless worries, sleepless nights, and forced smiles. Her shoulders, usually held straight, now carried a slight stoop. When had she gotten so old? So tired. She moved to the kitchen, the familiar scent of the celebration dinner she was preparing filling the air. Liam had gone out with his friends for a pre-dinner drink. Just for a bit, Grandma, he'd promised. She knew a bit could mean hours. As she stirred the simmering pot, she whispered to herself, "He doesn't mean to be cruel. He's young. He just doesn't think." She clung to that excuse, a fragile shield against the truth that threatened to shatter her completely. But a deeper, more insistent voice echoed in the quiet apartment, a voice that sounded remarkably like her own, yet colder, wiser, more wounded. What if he never understands? What if, Eleanor, you've given everything you had, everything you were for absolutely nothing? The question hung in the air, heavy and inescapable, threatening to drown her in its chilling implication. The bitter taste of Liam's words still lingered, a metallic tang on Eleanor's tongue as she meticulously arranged the cutlery for the celebration dinner. But as she moved through the motions, her mind drifted back, not to the sharp sting of the present, but to a time when their bond had been an impenetrable shield against the world's sorrows. After Michael and Sarah's accident, when Liam was just 12, their lives had shrunk to encompass only each other. The silence of the house had been suffocating, but in their shared grief, a fierce, unwavering connection had forged itself between them. Those nights were etched into Eleanor's memory with painful clarity. Liam, no longer a little boy but not yet a teenager, would crawl into her bed, his small body a comforting weight against her side. He wouldn't cry much then, but his eyes, so like Michael's, would be bright and searching in the dim nightlight. "Tell me about Dad," he'd whisper, his voice thin with longing. And Eleanor would oblige, recounting tales of Michael's mischievous childhood, his dreams, his kindness, trying to keep his memory alive, vivid and real, for the son who barely remembered him. She spoke of Michael's passion for baseball, how he'd spent hours practicing his swing in the backyard, even after it got dark. One sun-drenched Saturday, Liam had unearthed an old, dusty leather glove from the back of the garage. It was Michael's, worn soft and supple from years of use. "Grandma, can we play?" he had asked, his eyes shining with a rare spark of innocent joy. And so they did. Eleanor, her throws a little wobbly, her catches more hopeful than skillful, laughed as Liam, mimicking his father's stance, chased down stray balls and crowed with delight when he made a clean catch. Those were precious days, fragile and fleeting, when they built something beautiful, a sanctuary of shared memories and quiet understanding from the rubble of their immense loss. Those were the days when she truly believed their connection was unbreakable. The first subtle cracks began to appear in middle school. Liam, suddenly acutely aware of the social hierarchies and unspoken rules of adolescence, started to change. He'd come home talking about what everyone else had, what everyone else did. His focus shifted from the comforting familiarity of their home life to the dazzling, often superficial, world of his peers. One morning, as Eleanor pulled her old station wagon up to the school gates, Liam stopped her. "Grandma," he said, not meeting her eye, "can you just drop me off a block or two down and it's just easier?" The unspoken words hung in the air. Easier if my friends don't see me stepping out of this ancient car, if they don't associate me with our modest house on the quiet street. Eleanor felt a familiar pang, but she nodded, feigning understanding. She considered, for a fleeting moment, dipping into Liam's nascent college savings to buy a newer, more anonymous car, something less likely to invite the subtle judgment of middle schoolers. But the practicality of saving for his future won out, as it always did. His education, she reasoned, was far more important than a momentary embarrassment. High school intensified this gradual shift into a noticeable chasm. Liam's new circle of friends came from more affluent backgrounds. Their lives were filled with expensive sports gear, designer clothes, and the latest, most cutting-edge phones. Liam quickly absorbed their tastes, their expectations. "Grandma, everyone on the lacrosse team has the new Nike Hyper Vapors," he'd declare, his voice edged with an almost desperate plea. "Mine are practically falling apart. I can't be the only one with old shoes." He knew how to play on her emotions, making her feel as though she was actively hindering his success, his social standing, if she resisted. And Eleanor, her heart aching to give him every advantage, always relented, finding the money, no matter how tight things were. The stakes grew even higher when college applications rolled around. Liam, influenced by his friends' aspirations, set his sights exclusively on prestigious, out-of-state universities. "State schools are for people who don't aim high, Grandma," he'd asserted, dismissing her suggestions of more affordable, equally reputable local options with a wave of his hand. "I need to go somewhere that'll challenge me, somewhere with a real reputation." He was already envisioning a future far grander than anything Eleanor could have imagined for herself. It was then that Eleanor realized her carefully built retirement nest egg wouldn't be enough. Not for the tuition Liam demanded. Not for the future he deserved. She made an appointment with a financial advisor, a kind woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. The conversation was blunt, the numbers stark. "Mrs. Vance, to cover this level of tuition without significant loans, you'll need to sell your primary residence. And frankly, you'll likely need to continue working well past your planned retirement." The words, though expected, still struck her with the force of a physical blow. Later that week, over coffee, her lifelong friend Beatrice listened with a furrowed brow. "Eleanor, are you sure about this? Selling your home? Working until you drop? What would Michael and Sarah have wanted for you?" Beatrice's question hung in the air, a stark reminder of Eleanor's own neglected well-being. But Eleanor merely shook her head, a determined glint in her eyes. "They would have wanted Liam to have every opportunity," she replied, her voice firm. She ignored Beatrice's concerned gaze, ignored the quiet voice of her own heart. The sale of the house was swift, a blur of real estate agents, legal documents, and packing boxes that felt like they were holding not just her belongings, but 40 years of her life. She moved into the small one-bedroom apartment, its walls feeling cold and unfamiliar, just as Liam packed his bags for his university dorm. On the day he left, she helped him load his carefully chosen belongings into a rented car. He was excited, bubbling with anticipation for his new chapter. As they said goodbye, standing on the curb of her tiny new street, he glanced around. "So, this is your new small place, huh?" he commented, a casual, almost indifferent observation, his thumb already poised over his phone screen. Eleanor merely nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She watched him walk away, already absorbed in texting someone, already distant. The tears welled up, hot and swift, but she barely noticed them. Her focus was on Liam, shrinking into the distance, already gone, already moving on without a backward glance. The graduation dinner continued to simmer on the stove, its comforting aroma a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within Eleanor. She thought back to the past 4 years, the relentless march of time marked by an ever-widening chasm between herself and Liam. His calls grew less frequent, evolving from weekly check-ins to sporadic texts, then to almost complete silence. Visits home, once a cherished expectation, ceased almost entirely. He was too busy, he'd explain, buried in studies, overwhelmed by extracurriculars, always some valid, unassailable reason. His messages became predictable. A brief hello, a polite inquiry about her, quickly followed by a request. It was always money. For textbooks, for a sudden required trip for a class, for spring break with his friends, for the deposit on a new swankier apartment closer to campus. Each request, no matter how substantial, was accompanied by the implicit understanding that this was for his future, for the life Michael and Sarah would have wanted him to have. Eleanor, despite the growing stiffness in her joints, in the dull, persistent ache in her bones, and picked up extra shifts at the grocery store. Her doctor, a kind but firm woman, had warned her about her worsening arthritis, about the need to slow down, to rest. Eleanor had politely nodded, then returned to stacking shelves, pushing heavy carts, ignoring the escalating pain. The grocery store lights, harsh and unyielding, seemed to mock her fading strength. She sent every penny she could spare, always without a single complaint. It wasn't just about money, it was about her investment, her unwavering belief in his potential, her desperate hope that she was doing right by him, ensuring he would succeed and have the privileged life his parents had intended. 2 years into his college journey, a milestone birthday approached for Liam. Eleanor, her heart aching for connection, decided on a surprise visit. She baked his favorite chocolate cake, a recipe perfected over decades, and carefully wrapped a new cashmere sweater, a small indulgence she knew he would appreciate. The 3-hour drive felt long, but her anticipation buoyed her spirits. She pictured his face, the surprise, the genuine delight. When she arrived at his apartment building, the muffled thump of music greeted her. As she knocked, the door swung open, revealing a noisy, crowded party already in full swing. Liam, caught in mid-conversation, turned, his eyes widening in shock, then annoyance. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" The words hit her like a physical blow, stripping away her joy, replacing it with a cold, hollow dread. Her carefully planned surprise had become an unwelcome intrusion. She tried to explain, her voice feeling small and inadequate against the thrum of the music and laughter. I wanted to surprise you for your birthday. I brought cake." She held up the delicate box, feeling foolish, out of place. Liam, flustered, gestured vaguely towards the kitchen. Thanks, Grandma. Just put it in there. I'll be right there." Eleanor retreated to the kitchen, a quiet sanctuary from the boisterous party. She placed the cake on the counter, the sweater still clutched in her hands. No one noticed her, no one acknowledged her presence. She sat on a stool, a silent observer in the margins of her grandson's vibrant life. Hours passed. Liam eventually reappeared, looking tired but still animated from the revelry. He offered her a quick, almost dismissive hug, a perfunctory peck on her cheek. "Thanks for coming, Grandma. This was unexpected." He didn't ask her to stay, didn't offer her a piece of her own cake. She sensed she was dismissed. Gathering her things, her heart heavy, she murmured a goodbye, unheard by most. She drove the 3 hours back to her tiny apartment, tears streaming down her face, blurring the highway lights into shimmering streaks of pain. Each tear was a testament to the deepening chasm between them. Now on graduation day, as the celebration dinner continued to cook, the memory of that birthday party and so many similar moments solidified into an undeniable truth. The sweet, dependent boy who once clung to her hand was gone. He had been replaced by this self-assured, almost aloof young man. A knock on the apartment door. "Grandma, we're back!" Liam's voice, bright and eager, cut through her reverie. She hurried to open it, trying to compose herself. Liam stood there, not alone, but with a stunning young woman clinging to his arm. Chloe, he introduced her, his girlfriend. Chloe was beautiful, with perfectly styled, expensive highlights, a sleek designer dress, and a diamond bracelet that sparkled on her wrist. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over Eleanor's simple floral dress and worn comfortable shoes, a subtle judgment playing on her lips. "Liam never mentioned you were coming," Chloe said, her voice polite but cool, a hint of suspicion in her tone. Eleanor offered a strained smile. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she managed. Liam, seemingly oblivious or perhaps uncaring of the subtle tension, clapped Eleanor on the shoulder. "Chloe, this is Eleanor, my grandmother. Basically my personal scholarship fund, wouldn't you say, Grandma?" He chuckled, a light-hearted joke meant to amuse Chloe, who offered a tinkling, appreciative laugh. The words, though delivered with a smile, hit Eleanor with the force of a punch. Personal scholarship fund. That's all she was to him. An ATM with gray hair, a financial resource, not a beloved family member. Something inside her crumbled further, a fundamental piece of her identity shattering into dust. She forced a smile, a practiced mask she had perfected over years of similar slights. As she turned back to the kitchen, busying herself with the dinner preparations, she overheard Chloe whisper to Liam, "Her dress is a bit dated, isn't it?" Liam's low chuckle confirmed her embarrassment, sealed her place as an object of mild ridicule, not affection. That night, lying awake in her small, unfamiliar bed, Eleanor stared at the ceiling. The fear that had been a distant murmur now screamed in her ears. Now that Liam had his degree, now that he was embarking on his career, now that he no longer needed her financial support, what would happen? Would she simply fade from his life entirely? The question she had so meticulously avoided for years now stood stark and unavoidable in the darkness, a looming, terrifying prospect. What truly would happen now? The morning after graduation, a thin sliver of sunlight pierced the blinds of the guest room in Liam's apartment. Eleanor woke, not to the gentle stirrings of the city, but to the bright, unrestrained laughter of Liam and Chloe filtering through the thin walls. Their voices, so carefree and full of youthful exuberance, seemed to mock the quiet despair that had settled in Eleanor's heart during the long, sleepless night. She pushed herself up, her joints stiff and protesting, and moved to the small mirror. Her reflection stared back, a stranger with deeper lines around the eyes, a mouth set in a permanent downward curve, and a sadness in her gaze that felt ancient. When did I become this old woman, she wondered, the question echoing her silent query from the night before. She dressed in her travel clothes, the modest dress from yesterday still feeling like a costume, out of place amidst the chic, modern decor of Liam's apartment. When she entered the kitchen, the lively chatter of Liam, Chloe, and two other friends instantly ceased. They were gathered around the gleaming island, Liam flipping pancakes, the air thick with the sweet scent of maple syrup and easy camaraderie. The silence, sudden and abrupt, was louder than any spoken word. Liam offered a quick, somewhat flustered smile. "Morning, Grandma. Slept okay?" Before Eleanor could fully reply, he turned back to his friends, his voice animated once more. "So, the lake house trip is definitely on for next weekend. Chloe's dad is letting us use his place up in Tahoe. It's going to be epic." Eleanor, attempting to bridge the distance, offered a quiet suggestion. "Oh, that sounds lovely. I was thinking perhaps we could all have lunch today. A proper celebration before I head back?" Liam didn't even turn around. "Nah, Grandma, we've got plans. No, post-graduation stuff. We're meeting up with more friends." His tone was dismissive, almost an afterthought. Chloe, ever the gracious hostess, interjected, her voice dripping with a false sweetness that Eleanor now recognized instantly. "Oh, Mrs. Vance, You should totally come to the lake house. It's so much fun. Though there are a lot of stairs and it's a bit rustic. You'd have to bring your own linens, of course. We only have so many spares. The words were an invitation, but the undertone was a clear dissuasion, a polite way of saying you wouldn't fit in. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of humiliation wash over her. She excused herself to grab her bag from the guest room, the conversation in the kitchen resuming the moment she turned her back. As she reached the doorway, Liam's voice, hushed but still audible, drifted to her. Honestly, she's stuck in like 1980. It's embarrassing. A ripple of laughter followed, Chloe's tinkling laugh distinct among them. Something inside Eleanor, a fragile thread that had held her together through years of quiet sacrifice and unspoken pain, snapped. It wasn't a violent heartbreak, but a clean, decisive one. The shock of it, the sheer clarity, was almost disorienting. She zipped her small travel bag with deliberate, almost surgical calm, the sound a sharp rasp in the otherwise silent room. She walked back into the kitchen, her steps steady, her gaze unwavering. "Liam," she said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the casual chatter. He turned, startled, his smile fading. "Yeah, Grandma? I need to speak with you. Privately." He glanced at Chloe, then back at Eleanor, a hint of annoyance flickering in his eyes. "Grandma, can this wait? We were just about to head out." "No," Eleanor replied, her voice gaining a surprising strength. "No, it can't wait, not anymore." The abruptness in her tone seemed to catch him off guard. He sighed, a dramatic gesture of inconvenience, but motioned her towards the guest room. The others exchanged knowing glances, their smiles hinting at a shared amusement over the dramatic old lady. Inside the guest room, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Eleanor closed the door firmly, the click echoing loudly. She faced him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I heard you yesterday, Liam," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "At the graduation, when you told the photographer to crop the old lady out. And again just now about me being stuck in 1980. Liam's face registered surprise, then a flush of embarrassment. He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding her gaze. "Grandma, look, you weren't supposed to hear that. I was just joking around. You know how it is." There was no remorse in his voice, only a defensive fluster, an attempt to brush it all away. "Joking?" Eleanor's voice rose slightly, a raw edge to it. "No, Liam, that wasn't a joke. That was the truth, wasn't it? The truth of how you see me, an embarrassment, something to be cropped out of your perfect picture." He scoffed, a dismissive sound. "You're being dramatic, Grandma. Seriously, it's not that big of a deal." "Not that big of a deal?" Eleanor echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Not a big deal? Then tell me, Liam, why have you spent the last few years hiding me? Why do you always drop me off a block away? Why do I only hear from you when you need money? Why couldn't I meet your friends? Your girlfriend?" Liam's jaw tightened, his casual demeanor hardening into something colder, more defiant. He finally met her gaze, his eyes devoid of the warmth she remembered. "Because, Grandma, I didn't want to brag about my sad orphan story, okay? About how I was raised by my old grandmother who works at a grocery store. It's not exactly the image I'm going for." Eleanor stared at him, the words echoing in her ears. "The image you're going for." Her mind replayed his words, then his description of her to Chloe just yesterday. "My personal scholarship fund." Now he had just called her my sad orphan story and baggage. It all fit. "Baggage," she whispered, the word tasting like ash. He didn't flinch. "Look, Grandma, I appreciate everything, really, but it's time I moved on. I'm an adult now. I grew up. Maybe you should too." He turned then, his eyes already flicking towards the door, ready to escape. He walked out of the room without another word, leaving Eleanor standing alone in the silent guest room, her heart not just shattered, but pulverized into a million irreparable pieces. The chasm between them had just become an impassable canyon. If you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated, this part of Eleanor's story will resonate deeply. Don't miss how she starts to reclaim her life. Keep watching to see her journey unfold. Like this video Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you don't miss a single moment. The drive from Liam's apartment back to her own felt interminable, a blur of highway and blurred vision. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her heart a raw, bleeding wound. In her rearview mirror, she saw Liam's building recede into the distance. She imagined him turning back to his friends, effortlessly resuming his celebratory mood, already forgetting the scene they just had, already forgetting her. The finality of his words, "I grew up, maybe you should too," echoed with chilling clarity, an abrupt, brutal dismissal of decades of unwavering devotion. Her own apartment, usually a haven of quiet solitude, now felt emptier than ever. The silence that pressed in was heavy, suffocating. With trembling hands, she took the framed photo of Liam from her bedside table, a picture of him at 8, all missing front teeth and mischievous grin, and placed it face down. She couldn't bear to look at the innocent face that masked the stranger he had become. Eleanor sank onto her small sofa, the worn cushions offering little comfort. She finally allowed herself to feel the full, crushing weight of her exhaustion, both physical and emotional. The years of working 2 jobs, the constant worry, the relentless sacrifice, it all crashed down upon her. "I tried, Michael," she whispered into the empty air, her voice hoarse, as if speaking to her deceased son. "I really tried." The tears came then, a torrent that had been held back for too long. She cried for the sweet grandson she had lost, for the retirement she had cheerfully sacrificed, for the comfortable home she had given up, for the life she had so patiently put on hold, believing a brighter future for Liam would somehow redeem it all. Just as the tears began to subside, her phone, a relic of an older model, vibrated on the coffee table. It was Beatrice. Eleanor almost didn't answer, ashamed of the broken sound she knew her voice would make. But something, perhaps a deep, unconscious need for connection, made her press the green button. "Eleanor, is that you? You sound terrible, dear. What's wrong?" Beatrice's familiar voice, warm and laced with concern, was a balm, but also a trigger. I've been crying," Eleanor confessed, the admission a crack in her carefully constructed facade. "Crying. Oh, Eleanor, what happened? Was it Liam? Tell me everything." And so Eleanor did. The humiliation at graduation, the cutting remarks, the personal scholarship fund joke, the lake house dismissal, and finally the brutal confrontation that morning. She poured out her shattered heart, recounting Liam's cold words, his casual cruelty, the stark realization that she was nothing more than an inconvenient relic. Beatrice listened, silent and attentive, until Eleanor's voice faded into choked sobs. Then a different kind of sound erupted from the phone, a sharp, indignant intake of breath. "That ungrateful little... Oh, Eleanor, I told you he was taking advantage. And to say such things, he called you baggage? The nerve of that boy. And you stop making excuses for him right this instant. He's young. He doesn't mean to be cruel. Poppycock. He's a grown man now, and he knows exactly what he's doing." Eleanor, caught between shame and a desperate need for guidance, felt utterly helpless. "But B," she managed, her voice still thick with tears, "I still love him. What do I do?" Beatrice's voice softened slightly, though the indignation remained. "Of course you do, Beth. He's your grandson. But loving him doesn't mean you have to endlessly sacrifice yourself on his altar. It doesn't mean you have to be his doormat. Tell me, when was the last time you did something, anything, purely for yourself? Something that brought you joy, not just because it benefited Liam?" The question hung in the air, heavy and profound. Eleanor searched her memory, trying to recall a single instance, a fleeting moment of self-indulgence or personal pursuit that wasn't tied to Liam's well-being or future. There was nothing. Her mind was a blank. All her waking hours, all her thoughts, had been consumed by him. She suddenly realized with a shocking clarity that Beth, the woman Eleanor Vance used to be, had slowly, meticulously ceased to exist, subsumed entirely by the role of Liam's grandmother. I don't know," Eleanor whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a fresh loss. Exactly, Beatrice said gently. Well, that's about to change. My book club meets next Tuesday. We're reading that new historical fiction everyone's raving about. You're coming. No excuses. No, I'm too tired or I have to work. You're coming. The invitation, appealing yet terrifying in its demand for her to step out of her carefully constructed isolation, was a lifeline. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then a nascent flicker of defiance stirring within her. She agreed. Okay, B, okay, I'll come. That night, after a long, hot bath that eased some of the physical aches, Eleanor looked around her small apartment with new eyes. It was clean, functional, certainly hers. But it contained nothing, absolutely nothing, that spoke to who Eleanor Vance truly was. No personal touches, no cherished mementos from her life, only things that served a purpose or reminded her of a past she'd largely sacrificed. On a sudden impulse, she walked to the back of her closet and pulled out a dusty cardboard box. Inside, nestled beneath layers of old newspaper, were remnants of a life she'd almost forgotten. A leather-bound journal, its pages filled with elegant cursive from decades ago. A stack of watercolor paintings, landscapes vibrant with color, from a time when she found solace in art, a delicate piece of embroidery, unfinished, depicting a field of wildflowers. And there, at the bottom, carefully wrapped in a soft cloth, was her old Nikon camera, a sturdy, classic model that had once been her prized possession. She lifted the camera, its familiar weight comforting in her hands. She ran her thumb over the cold metal, remembering the thrill of capturing a perfect sunset, the joy of framing a moment in time, the satisfaction of developing her own prints in a makeshift darkroom. When had that joy become a luxury she couldn't afford? When had the simple act of pursuing a personal passion become an impossible indulgence? A small, almost imperceptible spark ignited within her. It was a fragile thing, easily extinguished, but it was there, Ishamo. She woke the next morning not with a heavy heart, but with a new purpose, a tiny seed of possibility taking root in the fertile ground of her rediscovered self. The morning after her conversation with Beatrice, a lightness Eleanor hadn't felt in years settled in her chest. She found herself humming a forgotten tune as she drove to a local electronics store. Walking through the gleaming aisles of cameras, she felt a curious blend of nostalgia and anticipation. After a brief chat with a knowledgeable salesperson, she settled on a new digital Nikon, a modern descendant of her old film camera. The weight of it in her hands, sleek and responsive, brought a genuine, unbidden flicker of excitement, a feeling so unfamiliar, yet so welcome. She spent the entire afternoon at the sprawling city park, the new camera a comfortable extension of her hand. She captured the vibrant greens of early summer foliage, the intricate details of a blossoming rose, the playful antics of ducks waddling by the pond. She zoomed in on the unself-conscious joy of children chasing pigeons, and the quiet, enduring affection evident in the intertwined hands of elderly couples on a bench. With each click of the shutter, with every frame composed, Eleanor felt something long dormant within her begin to stir, to awaken. It wasn't just about the photographs, it was about seeing the world again, truly seeing it through her own eyes. It was about realizing that she was Eleanor, a woman with passions, interests, and a unique perspective, completely independent of her roles as a grandmother or a caretaker. By Thursday, the new mystery novel Beatrice had assigned for book club was already half read, its engaging plot a refreshing escape. Her memory card, just days ago empty, was now filled with hundreds of images, each one a testament to her reawakened creative spirit. The transformation was subtle but profound. Tuesday evening arrived, and Eleanor dressed with a care she hadn't given her appearance in years. She chose a soft blue blouse, one that subtly brought out the faded blue of her eyes, and a comfortable but stylish skirt. She even applied a touch of lipstick, a forgotten ritual that brought a faint, almost shy smile to her reflection. When Beatrice opened her door, her eyes lit up. "Eleanor, you look wonderful, dear," she exclaimed, a genuine warmth in her voice. Eleanor felt a blush creep up her neck, a shyness she hadn't known she still possessed, but also a quiet, profound pleasure. The book club meeting was a revelation. Surrounded by a group of intelligent, engaging women, Eleanor found herself not only contributing to the literary debate, but actively enjoying it. She laughed at witty remarks, shared her own interpretations of characters, and even found herself recounting small anecdotes from her past, anecdotes that had nothing to do with Liam. She felt seen, heard, and for the first time in what felt like forever, relevant. Her opinions mattered, her presence was valued, and her identity extended beyond her family ties. Driving home in the quiet evening, a profound realization washed over her. She hadn't thought about Liam all evening. The constant ache, the persistent worry, the gnawing guilt that usually accompanied her every waking moment had been absent. A wave of immense relief swept through her, followed immediately by a sharp stab of guilt. How could she not think of him? Was she truly that cold, that uncaring? Then Beatrice's words from days ago echoed in her mind, a gentle but firm reminder. Loving him doesn't mean you have to keep sacrificing yourself. And just as quickly, the guilt began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of self-acceptance. As she pulled into her apartment building, she noticed the blinking light on her answering machine. It was Liam. His voice, when she played the message, sounded subdued, a little hesitant. Grandma, just checking in. Heard you left pretty fast this morning. Hope you got home okay. Call me when you get a chance. He sounded different, not apologetic perhaps, but certainly not his usual dismissive self. Eleanor stared at the phone, her finger hovering over the dial pad. For a long moment, she considered calling him back, explaining, perhaps even apologizing for the confrontation. But then she pulled her hand away. No, she whispered to the empty room. Tonight belongs to me. The next 3 months flew by with a speed that astonished Eleanor. Book club became a cherished weekly ritual, expanding her mind and her social circle. She enrolled in a beginner's digital photography class, delighting in learning new techniques and sharing her work with others who understood her passion. She even started volunteering twice a week at a local animal shelter, finding immense comfort and purpose in caring for the abandoned animals. Her small apartment, once a sparse, impersonal space, began to transform. Her photographs, framed with simple elegance, adorned the walls, each one a window into her rediscovered joy. Colorful cushions appeared on the sofa, a small, vibrant rug warmed the living area, and a collection of fragrant herbs now thrived on her tiny balcony. For the first time since she had sold her beloved house, this modest apartment felt truly like home, a reflection of the woman she was becoming. Contact with Liam remained minimal, and when it did occur, often awkward. A few texts, a couple of brief, strained phone calls. He hadn't asked for money, which was a relief, but he also hadn't made any real effort to connect on a deeper level. The ache in Eleanor's heart remained, a dull, constant throb, but it no longer consumed her. She was learning to live with it, to acknowledge it, but also to find profound joy and purpose in her own, vibrant, reawakened life. She was learning to be Eleanor again. On a crisp September morning, 3 months after Liam's graduation, Eleanor was watering the herbs on her balcony when her doorbell rang. It was an unexpected sound, as visitors to her small apartment were rare. Her heart gave an uncharacteristic flutter, a nervous anticipation she couldn't quite place. When she opened the door, she found Liam standing on her welcome mat, looking utterly uncharacteristic. His usually perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes looked rumpled, and his face, usually so confident, was pale and drawn, etched with a vulnerability she hadn't seen since he was a frightened 12-year-old. Grandma, he asked, his voice hesitant, almost small. Eleanor merely nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Liam entered, his eyes slowly sweeping over her transformed apartment. He noticed the framed photographs adorning the walls, the vibrant park scenes, the candid street shots, a stark black and white portrait of a laughing baker. He saw the brightly colored cushions on her sofa, the new books stacked neatly on her reclaimed bookshelf, the thriving herbs on the balcony. He paused at a particular photograph, a black and white shot of an elderly couple, their hands clasped, their faces lined with a lifetime of shared experiences, their eyes full of a quiet understanding. "This is good, Grandma," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, as he traced the outline of the frame. "Who are they?" His genuine curiosity was a surprising welcome change. Eleanor explained it was a candid shot from the park, a moment she had captured that spoke of enduring love. He just nodded, his gaze distant. Then he turned to face her, his shoulders slumping. I, I lost the marketing job, Grandma, he confessed, his voice barely audible. The one I was so sure I had. They said my lack of real-world experience was an issue. He paused, taking a shaky breath. And Chloe left me. For someone with better prospects, she said. Someone with a more stable future. The words, delivered with a bitter irony, hung heavy in the air. He confessed he couldn't afford his apartment anymore. Not with his savings dwindling and no job prospects on the horizon. His voice cracked as he added, I have nowhere to go, Grandma. Can I stay with you, just until I get back on my feet? Eleanor felt the familiar, powerful tug on her heartstrings, the instinct to scoop him up, protect him, solve all his problems. But then Beatrice's words echoed in her mind, a firm, guiding whisper. Loving him doesn't mean you have to endlessly sacrifice yourself. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. Why me, Liam? She asked, her voice calm, devoid of judgment, but firm. You have all those friends, all those connections. Why aren't you asking them? He looked away, shame coloring his cheeks. They're not answering my calls, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Or they're too busy. I guess the perks of being friends with me dried up pretty fast without the fancy apartment or the job prospects. He finally met her gaze, his eyes glistening. You're the only person who's never given up on me, Grandma. Even when I deserved it. I need help, Grandma. His voice cracked and a single tear escaped, tracing a path down his cheek. Eleanor felt the familiar ache in her chest, the raw maternal instinct to embrace him. But she held back, remembering the shattered pieces of her own heart. I'll help you, Liam, she announced, her voice gentle yet unwavering, but not the way I have in the past. Liam looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I won't give you money, Liam, she stated plainly, and you can't live here. This is my home, and I need my space, but I will help you find a real job, one that fits your skills, even if it's not the image you thought you wanted. And I will help you find an affordable apartment, somewhere you can start fresh. I'll even co-sign your lease, if that's what it takes to get you started. She paused, letting her words sink in. But understand this, Liam, I'm not your ATM anymore, and I'm not your safety net. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Liam's face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. He opened his mouth to protest, but Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. You treated me like I was nothing, Liam. Like an embarrassment, an inconvenience. And I deserve better than that. We both do. The anger in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something akin to genuine remorse. More tears welled up, spilling freely now. I know, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I know, Grandma, and I'm so sorry. What happened to us, Grandma? He asked, his voice small, a lost boy once more. Eleanor looked at him, her gaze soft but clear. You grew up, Liam, and I let myself disappear. He sat down heavily on her sofa, burying his face in his hands. He started to recount the past few months, the dizzying fall from grace, the sudden coldness of his fair-weather friends, the emptiness of the life he had so desperately chased. He spoke of the bitter sting of Chloe's rejection, the crushing weight of unemployment, the realization that the world he craved so desperately hadn't accepted on him, hadn't cared for him the way she always had. In his pain, in his loss, a deeper understanding seemed to be taking root. 3 months later, the aroma of garlic and onions filled Eleanor's apartment. She was chopping vegetables for a stew, a contented smile on her face. Liam, seated at her small kitchen table, was speaking professionally into his phone, his voice steady and confident. He had just interviewed for an accounting assistant position at a mid-sized firm, a lead Eleanor had gotten from Arthur, a kind man she had met through her photography class. They worked in a comfortable, companionable silence, a new rhythm settling into their shared space. Their relationship slowly but surely rebuilding itself on a more equal, respectful footing. He hung up, a hopeful look on his face. I think it went well, Grandma. Thanks again for connecting me with Arthur. He really vouched for me. He paused, then looked at her, his gaze sincere. And Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry for how I treated you, for what I said at graduation, for everything. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. I accept your apology, Liam, she said softly. But my help, my love, my guidance, it's not conditional on an apology. It's because you're my grandson, but you needed to learn some hard lessons. Liam nodded, his eyes reflecting a newfound maturity. I did. I really did. I guess I needed to fall flat on my face to learn what was truly important and who truly cares. He then looked at her with genuine enthusiasm. So that Sedona photography workshop you were telling me about? You should totally go, Grandma. You've earned it. He even teased her playfully. And how was your date with Arthur last night? Did he pass the grandson's approval test? Eleanor laughed, a full joyous sound. A year ago, she had been invisible, heartbroken, and lost. Now she was vibrant, self-assured, and building not just a new life for herself, but a new, stronger relationship with her grandson. She reflected on the profound changes, from invisibility to reclaiming her identity and building a new foundation with Liam. She felt a profound sense of peace and self-worth. Loving someone doesn't mean erasing yourself, she thought. It means loving yourself enough to teach them how to truly see you. That afternoon, she booked the Sedona photography workshop, a thrilling adventure awaiting her. Her phone buzzed. It was Liam. Hey, Grandma, about Sunday dinner, how about a rain check? Or better yet, why don't you come to my place? I'm trying out some new recipes. Eleanor smiled, a deep, genuine happiness bubbling within her. I'd like that, she replied. Later, she found herself on her balcony, her new Nikon in hand, focusing on a small sparrow perched on the railing. She saw the intricate details of its feathers, the intelligent glint in its eye, the delicate curve of its beak. She remembered the black and white photo of the elderly couple Liam had admired, and a profound understanding settled over her. What was missing from so many relationships, from their relationship, had been the ability to truly see each other, beyond roles, beyond expectations, beyond superficial images. She captured the sparrow just as it spread its wings, soaring away, a tiny free speck against the vast morning sky. She felt free, invisible too.